Picture this, a young man in a razor-sharp suit stands before a judge as if stepping onto a red carpet. He doesn't clear his throat, doesn't search for words, he slides a wallet from his inside pocket and says, almost cheerfully, "How much so we don't waste each other's time?" The room stills. Fluorescent lights hum. Somewhere, a pen taps once and stops. The morning docket had been ordinary, expired meters, rolling stops, someone late for work. Then he arrived, Nick Johnson, 24, the surname of a company stamped on half the buildings downtown. His shoes don't squeak. His smile doesn't reach his eyes. Judge Caprio doesn't lean forward or back. He simply looks at the wallet, then at the face holding it, and folds his hands. "Mr. Johnson, do you know why you're here?" Nick lifts a shoulder, a practiced gesture. "I suppose because this city has run out of real crimes." A low rustle slides through the gallery, coats shifting, a throat cleared, a small, disbelieving laugh that dies mid-breath. "A school crossing ticket," the file says. Excess speed where the pavement is painted with bright letters, slow. The kind of case that starts and ends in minutes. "Put the wallet away," Caprio says, soft as a door closing. "That's the worst move you'll make today." Nick obeys, but the smile lingers. He aims it like a flashlight. "Look, Judge, I can pay the fine. I can pay 10 fines. No offense, but we both have places to be." Caprio lets the silence work. It moves across the room like a tide, leaving people very still. "Where I have to be," he replies, "is right where the law asks me to stand." A clerk shifts a stack of citations. The officer who wrote this one stares at the floor, then up, as if deciding whether to breathe. Nick glances over his shoulder, finds the camera lens a local reporter forgot to cap, and straightens his tie by instinct. In a school zone, Caprio continues, "We count seconds differently. They're the kind you can't buy back." Nick's smile thins. "With respect, sir, nobody was hurt." "With respect," the judge says, "you don't get to finish that sentence by yourself." The door to the hallway hisses and closes, latecomers realize they're not entering a routine morning. Sunlight through the high windows cuts the dust in clean slabs. A woman in the third row presses a palm to her chest. An older man, coat folded in his lap, watches as if he's seen this play before and knows the turn that matters hasn't arrived yet. "My father has already spoken with the mayor," Nick offers, like a trump card placed face up. "He appreciates how busy you are." Caprio's eyes don't move from Nick's. "Then your father can appreciate this. In here, the busiest person is the truth." The line lands with no flourish, only weight. Nick's jaw works once. He opens his phone to check the time, catches the judge's gaze, and locks the screen. The wallet is back in his jacket, heavier now, useless as a brick. "We'll proceed," Caprio says. Slowly. "We'll measure our words the way a driver should measure a school crossing, by care, not convenience." From the first row, a child's backpack, forgotten from a previous case, leans against a bench, cartoon rockets faded by use. The detail seems to give the room context it didn't ask for. Nick notices it and looks away. "I can settle this," he insists, softer than before. "You name a number." Caprio almost smiles, not from amusement, but in recognition of a lesson beginning. "A number, Mr. Johnson, is what you reach for when you've run out of reasons." The clerk calls the case number, the echo makes the room feel larger than it is. Outside, a siren rises and falls and is gone. Inside, the judge sets the file down as though it might bruise if handled roughly. "Let's start at the beginning," he says. "Not with the money. With the moment you press the accelerator where children cross." Nick's fingers drum twice against his cuff, then stop. He looks for a quick exit and finds only the aisle everyone else uses. "And, Mr. Johnson," Caprio adds, voice steady, "do pass along a message to your father." A beat, enough to gather the words into something that will not be mistaken. "Justice in this courtroom is not for sale." "Where are you watching from?" Let me know in the comments below and don't forget to subscribe to this channel. He grew up in a house where doors opened before he touched the handle. At 7, Nick learned to write his name by signing thank you cards for donations he hadn't made. At 12, he watched his father cut a ribbon at a children's wing that bore their surname, cameras clicking like applause. The lesson wasn't spoken, it soaked in. Money is a key, and every lock is the same. By high school, he'd mastered the script. A missed deadline? We'll make a call. A failed exam? We'll discuss opportunities. When a teacher tried to keep his phone during a quiz, the device returned the next day in a velvet pouch from the principal's office. Nothing dramatic, just a gentle rearrangement of consequence. His mother had been the soft edge in that house. After she died, the rooms grew quieter and the rules stricter. His father moved like a calendar with legs, meetings, flights, statements, and loved in ways that looked good in print, scholarships, gala tables, glossy promises. You represent us, he'd say, adjusting Nick's tie. If you can't buy time, you're not buying right. College arrived with a view of the river and a parking spot with his initials. When the dean called about a paper that looked too polished for a freshman, the call ended with an understanding. A semester later, a dorm fight vanished into a misunderstanding. Nick absorbed the vocabulary: resolve, expedite, accommodate. He mistook it for character. He did try to be decent. He bought coffees for friends, tipped extravagantly, posted about charity runs he never quite attended. But decency without friction is practice without weight. When real pressure came, grades, headlines, a girlfriend who asked him who he was without the last name, he had one move: reach for a card, a contact, a shortcut. It impressed almost everyone, including himself. There were moments when the pretense slipped. A night he drove the long way home past the hospital his mother never left. A morning he watched a crossing guard wave children through fog while drivers braked in respectful sequence and felt, briefly, like an intruder in someone else's order. He shook it off the way he shook off most feelings, with speed. His father wasn't cruel, he was busy. Praise came as quarterly reports: good optics on that volunteer thing. Disappointment came like a spreadsheet: missed opportunities. The message landed: virtue is a ledger line. If you're in the black, you're fine. So when he stood in Caprio's courtroom and offered to save time, he wasn't sneering, not entirely. He was speaking the only dialect that had ever worked. He expected the familiar pause, the tolerant sigh, the workaround. Instead, the silence had weight. It didn't bend. From the gallery, a retired teacher recognized the posture, the practiced calm. A maintenance worker recognized the watch. They all recognized the mistake: he thought what he'd brought was currency. In that room, it was counterfeit. What Nick didn't know, not yet, was that the file on the judge's bench held more than a speed reading. The officer's notes were thin, the plate traced to a corporate fleet, and somewhere in the paper snow was a second vehicle nobody had asked about. The first hairline crack had already appeared in the story he'd rehearsed, so fine you had to look for it. And Caprio was very good at looking. Most people thought it was just a speeding ticket, the clerk would later recall. But that morning, you could feel the air change. Caprio began simply, his voice the same calm tone that had handled thousands of minor cases. Mr. Johnson, you said you might not have been the one driving. Let's be precise. Who had access to the car? Nick shrugged lightly, but his confidence had a faint crack in it now. It's one of my father's company cars. Anyone in the logistics division, maybe. I don't keep track. The judge leaned back. Then we'll help you keep track. He motioned to the officer, who stepped forward with a folder of photos printed from the city's traffic cameras. One showed the car, blurred in motion, the next showed a different angle, the same model, the same color, the same distinctive dealership frame, but a license plate with one digit off. Caprio's brow furrowed. Officer, are you certain about your report? These timestamps are inconsistent. The officer hesitated. Sir, we pulled them directly from the system. But the records department, they asked us to file both under the Johnson Holdings account. Who asked? Caprio's voice was flat, surgical. Supervisor's note says the instruction came from corporate, liaison. Someone named M. Ritter. Said the mayor's office wanted the data streamlined for priority clients. A soft ripple passed through the courtroom. Nick's hand twitched toward his pocket, then stopped halfway. His phone buzzed once, silent mode, just enough vibration to draw his eyes. He flipped it discreetly open beneath the table. A message from an unknown number. Say nothing about the second car. He froze. Caprio noticed. Problem, Mr. Johnson? No, sir, Nick muttered, sliding the phone away. But the heat was rising under his collar. The spectators felt it too, the sensation of watching someone who'd never been cornered slowly realize he might be. Caprio tapped the folder gently with one finger. Let's talk about this second vehicle. The one not on record. Nick looked up sharply. There's nothing. Spare me, Caprio interrupted softly. The moment you hesitate, the truth starts breathing through the cracks. The judge's tone wasn't angry, it was weary, the sound of a man who'd seen too many stories collapse the same way. You were driving your company's car that night. But not the one listed in the citation. The other one, unregistered to the fleet, purchased privately. Correct? Nick's lips parted, but no sound came. Caprio's assistant had already laid out another set of documents, insurance forms, 2 VIN numbers, identical make and model. One belonged to Johnson Holdings. The other to a shell entity registered 3 weeks before the incident. Mr. Johnson, Caprio said, were you aware that a second vehicle matching your company car was registered under an alias connected to your father's firm? No, sir, I didn't. Caprio held up a hand. I'm not asking about your father. I'm asking about you. The words landed like a gavel strike. The young man's composure faltered. For the first time, his eyes darted not with arrogance but fear. The judge pressed on, quietly, you were seen leaving the downtown corridor minutes before a collision on Broad Street. A child was struck, not seriously hurt, thank God, but the car fled. The license plate reported the same number as yours, except for that one altered digit. A tremor rippled through the audience. Someone whispered, my God. Nick's voice, barely audible, I didn't hit anyone. I swear. I was following someone. I stopped. Caprio's gaze didn't waver. Then why didn't you report it? Nick's answer came like a confession pulled through his teeth, because my father said it would complicate things. He told me the company lawyers would handle it. Caprio leaned forward, elbows on the bench. And what did you think he meant by that? Nick's throat tightened. That money fixes confusion. The silence that followed was heavier than outrage. It was recognition, the slow, quiet realization that this wasn't a spoiled boy's arrogance anymore. It was survival. Conditioned, learned, almost inherited. Caprio looked down at the papers again. You understand, Mr. Johnson, that lying in this courtroom is perjury. But telling the truth might finally set something straight in that family of yours. Nick stared at the floor. You wouldn't understand what it's like living under him. Caprio's voice softened but didn't bend. You're wrong. Every man in this room understands what it's like to answer to someone. The question is who we choose to answer to. He paused, the air thick with restraint. I think, he said quietly, you've been answering to the wrong one. The young man exhaled, shaky. His father's shadow seemed to hang in the room, unseen but suffocating. Caprio set the file aside. Mr. Johnson, he said, I'm giving you a recess. Go home, look at yourself, not your family's name. When we continue, don't bring me your lawyers or your wallet. Bring me the truth. The gavel fell once, firm but not loud. The sound didn't end the session, it started the reckoning. Sometimes, truth doesn't surface because someone seeks it, it slips through when a single detail refuses to be erased. That morning, Judge Caprio was halfway through his notes when the phone on his desk buzzed. A soft, polite voice came through the line, "Judge, this is Daniel Cross from the mayor's office. I just wanted to ask that you approach the Johnson case with understanding." The judge didn't reply immediately. He stared at the receiver as if weighing the shape of the words. Understanding. He'd heard that word used to decorate lies before. "Thank you, Mr. Cross," he said evenly. "I'll approach it with exactly that." He hung up, expression unreadable. At that same moment, a bailiff walked in, holding a small flash drive sealed in an evidence bag. "Sir," the officer said quietly, "this came from the school's security system. You should see it." The courtroom lights dimmed slightly as Caprio plugged it in. The footage flickered, nighttime, rain-slick streets, the grainy view from a school camera. Then, in the beam of headlights, a car shot past a crosswalk. A small figure, a child, darted backward, barely escaping the front bumper. The vehicle jerked, paused for half a heartbeat, then accelerated away. Caprio leaned forward, breath controlled, eyes narrowing at the frame. It wasn't clear, but the driver's outline was unmistakable. Young. Alone. It was Nick Johnson. He closed the file and ejected the flash drive without a word. The room was still, unaware of the evidence that now sat in his palm like a live coal. When the hearing resumed, he studied Nick for a long moment before speaking. "Mr. Johnson," he said, tone level but sharp at the edges, "is there anything at all, you remember from that night that might help this court?" Nick's voice was quick, too quick. "No, sir. Nothing out of the ordinary." Caprio's eyes didn't move. "Then I'm afraid your memory is about to improve." Before Nick could respond, the courtroom doors opened. The mayor's assistant, Cross again, walked briskly inside, holding a leather portfolio. "Your Honor," he began, a faint smile fixed in place, "there's been a misunderstanding. I've reviewed the reports, and it seems this citation may be administrative in nature. Perhaps we can close it without further review." The words fell like stones into water. Every sound in the room vanished. Even Nick stopped breathing. Caprio stood slowly. The years on the bench had carved patience into him, but this moment scraped against its last layer. "Mr. Cross," he said, voice low enough to draw every ear closer, "you've just said a sentence that should never be spoken in a courtroom." The assistant blinked, faltering. "I only meant." "What you meant," Caprio cut in, "is that power should outweigh truth. And I want you, and everyone here, to remember this, truth doesn't bargain." The air felt electric. The clerk looked down, a reporter's pen froze mid-note. Caprio turned back to Nick. "Your father's reach ends at that door. Inside this room, your name doesn't buy you forgiveness. It only buys you the chance to face what you've done." Nick tried to smile, a reflex born of habit, but it came out wrong, tight, hollow, almost frightened. For the first time, his composure slipped completely. Caprio took the flash drive, sealed it into an envelope, and handed it to the bailiff. "Secure this. It's no longer evidence, it's history." He faced the room one last time. "If anyone believes justice can be purchased," he said, his voice steady and cold, "you've come to the wrong building." The assistant lowered his eyes, retreating a step. Nick's hands trembled in his lap. The gavel came down once, sharp, final, and the sound lingered like a warning. Outside, thunder rolled across Providence. Inside, for the first time, Nick Johnson began to understand what fear really cost. Caprio could have ended it there. The evidence was clear, the moral already spoken. Most judges would have signed the dismissal, filed the paperwork, and let the silence bury the rest. But he didn't. He wanted the truth to breathe, fully, painfully, in public. Late that evening, long after the courtroom had emptied, he replayed the footage from the school's cameras again. This time, he slowed it frame by frame. The car's headlights caught a street sign, Elm Street, near Jefferson Elementary. The timestamp read 9:42 p.m., 1 hour after the citation was filed. Then another detail surfaced, a faint reflection in the passenger window. Not glass, but fabric, a school badge on a child's jacket. The impact didn't happen, but the near miss was close enough to bend fate. Caprio's pulse quickened. He called the police department directly. "Pull hospital records from that night," he said. "Any child admitted from that district. I want names." By morning, he had them. There was one. A boy, 8 years old, admitted with a fractured leg after being struck by a speeding car outside the same school. The report said, "Driver unknown." The hospital's expenses were fully covered, by a donation from the Johnson Family Foundation. Caprio closed his eyes. "Of course," he whispered. When court resumed, the atmosphere had changed. Word had leaked, something big was coming. Officers shifted uneasily. Nick sat pale, eyes fixed on the desk. Caprio addressed the room. "Yesterday, I was told this was a misunderstanding. Today, I have proof it was a cover-up." He summoned Officer Daniels, the one who had filed the initial citation. Daniels looked like a man walking into a storm. "I didn't want to hide it, sir," he said, voice cracking. "Orders came from above. They said it was better for everyone if the paperwork disappeared." "Who gave the order?" The pause lasted forever. "Deputy Chief Lannister. Said the mayor's office had cleared it." Caprio nodded slowly. "Did you know the child was injured?" Daniel swallowed hard. "Not until last week. I wanted to speak up, but you were told to forget." The officer nodded. Caprio turned to the gallery. "That's how injustice works. It doesn't roar, it whispers. It tells good men to forget." Then the courtroom door opened again, this time not with authority but with quiet resolve. A woman stepped forward, gray coat, tired eyes, holding a small USB stick. She introduced herself softly. "My name's Linda Harris. I work night security at Jefferson Elementary. My son was the boy who got hit." The audience froze. She continued, "I saved a copy of that video before they erased it. They told me not to speak, that the city would take care of it. But no one ever asked if my son still limps." Caprio gestured her closer. "You're safe here, Mrs. Harris." She nodded, eyes glistening. "I don't want revenge, sir. I just want the truth written somewhere it can't be deleted." The silence that followed wasn't empty, it was respect. Caprio took the USB, placed it beside the original evidence bag, and said quietly, "You've done more for this city tonight than most of its leaders ever have." He turned to Nick. The young man's face was ashen. "You see, Mr. Johnson," Caprio said, "this is what money can't buy, courage. You had power and lost it. She had nothing, and yet she stood taller than all of you." Nick's lips trembled. For the first time, he didn't try to defend himself. He simply whispered, "I didn't know it went this far." "It always goes farther than men like you think," Caprio replied. The gavel didn't strike that day. The judge just stood, looked across the room filled with silence, and said, "Today, we stop talking about fines. We start talking about responsibility. This is no longer about a ticket, it's about a life." No one dared move. The air was thick with something new, shame, yes, but also awakening. "Tomorrow," Caprio said, "we call the father." The courtroom was full before dawn. Reporters lined the back wall, the public pressed forward, waiting. Judge Caprio entered without ceremony, carrying a single folder. "Before we begin," he said, "know this, truth doesn't vanish when men try to bury it. It waits." Nick sat beside his father, pale and silent. Richard Johnson, calm as marble, addressed the bench. "Your Honor, this has gone far enough. My company supports this city. We can resolve this quietly. Caprio's eyes didn't move. You mean you can buy silence? Richard smiled faintly. I mean I can protect my family. By destroying someone else's? Caprio asked. The judge motioned to the clerk, who played the recovered video. The room darkened, the sound of screeching tires filled the air. Gasps broke out as the frame froze on Nick's terrified face behind the wheel. Richard stood abruptly. This is out of context. Caprio raised a hand. The only context that matters is the boy who still limps. Nick's voice trembled. Dad, stop. Please. I can't. Richard turned on him. You say nothing without my permission. Caprio leaned forward. He doesn't need your permission to be human. The silence was absolute. Then, softly, Nick said, I hit that boy. I left. And I let you cover it up because I was afraid of you. The room seemed to exhale at once. Caprio nodded slowly. Finally, the truth. He looked at Richard. You taught your son that power makes you untouchable. Today, you'll both learn what accountability feels like. He signed the order, voice calm but final. This case will be sent to the Attorney General. The evidence will be made public. Court is adjourned. The gavel struck once, sharp, echoing. Reporters rushed out. Richard sank into his seat, speechless. Nick stared at the floor, tears silent but clean. Caprio gathered his papers and paused at the door. Justice isn't about punishment, he said quietly. It's about remembering who we promised to be. Outside, the city buzzed with news of the verdict. Inside, the courtroom stood empty, except for the faint sound of truth settling into place.